The intro still makes me laugh, I have to say. It's how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm in my mother's studio basement, actually. Um, so weird setup today, but yeah, I guess we were considering whether we should do the Wingly today or not. It's uh, it's weird times in Israel. Where are you home, right? Like you're not.
Yeah, I'm home. I'm in Tel Aviv. We again, as you said, it's disturbing time in Israel. It's uh, exactly as you said. We were wondering whether to do this, and we were thinking first of all we're gonna have Mark today, which is always comforting. And the last 2 week was or the last 10, 11 days was hard. And I have to say I'm not really caught up with what's happening in Ring. So the changelog is also a nice way for me to kind of see what the team has been doing, and also kind of the container support that we're going to do with you is you wanted to show me this today because we were in the office today, and I said, you know what, let's wait for the Wingly. I want to see this live in the Wingly, and so it's a different show today, but I'm glad that people are here, uh, and um, and let's hope that
Yeah,
we have better times in Israel in the war.
yeah, crazy periods. We're all shocked mostly, and couldn't work for the majority of the past 2 weeks, especially with the kids and alarms and everything. So I think, like you said, we were all trying to somehow distract ourselves with work, and uh, Wing is definitely helping in that sense. I've been programming a lot. For me, like programming is easy, right? Like I can just like go and get into the zone, and I don't have to listen to the news, and so for me it was an opportunity to like actually go and code a little bit, and I'm happy to share a little bit what I've done with containers.
Awesome. I have to work on some docs and some PowerPoint presentations. That's
Very
not.
hard,
I'm
very
not achieving anything. I mean, I when I'm in my house, I'm with the kids, and there's some alarms from time to time. I'm not able to work. There's just too much distraction in the house. And when I come to the office, first of all, we meet with other people, so we talk about this. I mean, there's a lot of comfort in talking with other people about this, and also again, not doing something that you actually get feedback. I mean, immediate feedback like you have in programming. It's a hard task, and also coping with the fact that I'm not working as much as I want to do. But I understand that people are coping with much harder stuff today in Israel. And
Yeah. And I think, like you said, the fact that part of our team is not in Israel is helping us, pulls us out of this crazy reality, and we're super thankful for uh, their sensitivity and care, and everybody's super worried. And I think we're lucky, we're very lucky that our team is safe, but I think all of us have some connection to people who are affected by this. And
right, yeah, and so we do have a kind of a light show today. We have, as we said, the change log with Mark. That's the first thing, and we're going to have him in a second, and then we're going to talk with containers. We're not going to have a guest appearance. It just felt too much for us. Just um, and uh, let's see. We have a comment from Shai. I see. Yeah, and we have Hart here also. So thank you guys. Thank you guys and girls for this. So I think we had our intro, and let's call in Mark to save us from this situation. Okay,
let's get
how you
Mark.
doing? Let's get Mark. Mark, how you
Guys,
doing, man?
I'm doing really well. Happy to be here with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Have you done a lot of work lately in the in Wing? I mean, last time you've released, I mean, the changelog was a bunch of features. A lot of them came from under your envelope,
Under your wings.
under your wings.
Um, I've done. Every time I do the changelog, I do the command that it's. Oh, you're not sharing it yet, but I do git short log. which shows like it shows all the commits, right, and it groups it by author. And I'm like, oh wow, I guess it's always a good time for me to reflect on also what I've done, because I'm so like everyone a little selfish. You're like, what did I do first before I look at other people's things? It's nice. Okay, because sometimes, and I'm sure everyone feels this way. Sometimes you don't feel like you do enough, and like you get caught like in the weeds on things, and you forget like, oh, actually, I did some shit. It's not bad. All right. So it's always
you did go to declaration, which is like a big shit.
Oh, no.
Oh, you know what? I didn't put that in here. I forgot.
You didn't put that in?
Damn.
Well, because I said I first look at the list and see what I did, and then I'm like, okay, let me try to talk about myself as little as possible. And also, I don't want to be like vain about it. So I only have like one section for the language server stuff. We'll get to that. But yes, that did happen. I'll try to bring it up again when I show it.
I'll show I'll show go to declaration when we.
Okay, good.
Was
I
it
hope
hot?
it's working.
Is it? No, it's working. It's working. I used this today. Was it hot?
No,
No.
didn't do it. I just didn't do it until now. Anyway, so changelog. Here it is.
Do you want to do like this, or do you want to do like this?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
What?
Oh, I thought you were gonna do the intro.
Oh, the intro, man! I forgot about the intro. Which intro?
Bring it up. Hell yeah!
Nice. Okay.
Now, and this looks good. I think as long as the text is readable, which there is some code, so let me know if that's not legible. So 17 contributors to this, and for 67 changes, which so far every single time I've done this, the number of changes, even though it's been mostly the same amount of time between change logs. Like last week, I think it was 64.
Mark, I'm having problem hearing you. Elad, are you having problem hearing him as well?
I can hear him.
Okay. So
I'll try to move the mic over.
Much better, man. Thanks.
Okay, cool. So yeah, lots and lots of changes, and this change log will be a little bit shorter, just because last time I had way too many changes. I think it hurt the focus a little bit. So the format's a little different, a little bit bigger focus on things, or on less things. So to start off the fun, it does always seem to be Chris leading the charge. He tends to have like usually the bigger changes, so it's nice to lead with them. So Wingpack, aka we now have libraries. So you can use Wingpack to create an npm compatible tarball that you can npm install or publish, and the consumption of it is a lot like any other JSI library. Now, if you look in tarball, you'll actually notice it's Wing files. It's not exactly a JSI library, but the way you consume it in Wing is that way. And so now the capability is unlocked. It's a huge change, a huge like unlock for us. I put this actually isn't an upload. I did some trickery.
Yeah,
This
I'm
is
like
a fake NPM page.
Who published my library?
Yeah, I did it. I just published it without you. It actually got to version 39.15. It's crazy. I've been doing a lot of work
editing. A lot of HTML editing.
Also, if anyone notices I made a mistake in the screenshot, feel free to point and laugh at me at the mistake I made, if you can find it.
Wingpack.
Yeah, the URL is wrong.
Oh yeah.
I just tried to type in anyway. I don't know what else to say about this. It's kind of like an obviously huge thing. I don't know what else to go into details. I know Chris is still actively working on the library side as a whole, so there's more to come, I'm sure. But this is huge. I realize we're actually covering up the name.
Okay.
I guess we have to move.
Okay.
For that. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe let me try this thing. Yeah, let's do this thing.
That should be fine. We'll see if the code is too small.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, you guys have seen Chris's face. I think he's been in, or his digital face. He's been in every changelog, I think. So, but for the people that haven't been, see some more names later. I don't know, anything from you guys to add on this?
Yeah.
Do we have any published libraries yet, or just an ability to publish library?
I tried to find one. I think maybe Chris. I didn't ask Chris. I meant to ask him if he had published like a test one, but no. I mean, there's nothing like actually out.
So
For sure.
I think we have the external, the EX namespace, right? The table, I think, maybe DynamoDB. I'm not sure what's in it right now, but those things. Do we plan to get out of to get published away? Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
that's gonna be cool.
Yeah, and I think the thing that that we're trying to do, and I hope we'll have soon, is we have some plans for what we're trying to call kind of like a managed publishing experience for Wing libraries, because my experience publishing a lot of libraries is that the publishing part, the part where you're actually vending the library, bumping versions, creating change logs, API compatibility, all that stuff is usually pretty hard, and it's really hard to actually do correctly. And so we have some ideas on how to offer a more managed experience for publishing libraries, and we're going to experiment with that and see. Hopefully, it's going to be really awesome and really easy to create new libraries and share code in the Wing ecosystem. So I'm really excited about that, because I feel like that's a huge pain in other ecosystems and a big barrier for people to publish libraries, especially keeping them at high quality. And so that's coming up, but I'm super excited by this, because I feel like the ecosystem side of Wing is the most interesting part. Eventually, the interesting stuff is going to be on the ecosystem side. It's not going to be what we're trying to do is we're trying to build this low-level mechanism, right? Like this language and the SDK, the foundation. But the creativity comes from the ecosystem, and so like that's going to be super interesting to see what's popping up there.
Awesome.
Sure.
Mark, before we move forward, there's a suggestion for Matthew, and to basically spawn up another show as the changelog. And I say, let's talk about royalties. I would say that's
Exactly. There is a show.
I mean, well, we do have the In-Flight magazine is in theory if not the long form version of this, it's like I guess the more easy to consume version of the change, right. the separate thing, because that's what it ends up being, like a
awesome.
changelog.
Right.
So yeah, no, but I want to keep being a part of the Wingly. It's nice. It's nice that we're centralizing our creative efforts into this.
Great. Okay, Matthew. I think that's not going to happen this time. You're trying to take away my to distribute
your only star. Your only star.
All right.
Okay.
Next one. Okay. Next one is Change from Gary. Another name you'll see a lot here. Another small snail face you'll see in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
As usual. That's still the picture we're using for him. In the CLI, you can now, if you don't provide an option, I think for any of the commands, so wing it or wing test or wing compile, a default entry point will be, or a default set of entry points, if possible, will be chosen. By default for wing compile, it'll be a main file or a blah 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 .main.w, and for wing test, it'll look for all the wing tests in the current directory. Just a small usability update. I think especially for Wing tests, as we keep evolving what it means to test in Wing, this is sort of like when I think about defaults for most test runners, I'm like, okay, run the tests in my project. I don't care where they are. Just run them, or I want to filter them. Gary also added filtering previously. Like I want to, I don't know, this interface should become a lot simpler, and this is, I think, a step in the right direction. So yeah. Thank you to Gary for that.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, I love those small ergonomic changes.
Yep.
I'm gonna move on to a big one. So not only from a first-time contributor, so thank you to Jade for this, but a pretty big change, a whole entire namespace of functions.
Wow.
I didn't list all the APIs here. It's all the ones you'd expect from a file system library or a namespace. Although some additional ones like reading and writing JSON and YAML. Those are not usually built in, and a lot had this comment on that PR that I would agree with, that it's the design for the APIs here were very in line with the Wing's goals or tenets, design tenets. It was very, if not batteries included, what's the other term here? Like, it's good defaults. Just having really opinionated defaults that I mean, you were probably going to do anyway. And there are options. You can configure how you I think one of the ones I suggested was like make directory will automatically recursively create directories. It's not a default in most file system things, but like you're going to do it anyway.
No, like
You can turn it off if you want to.
MKD
it's like-
-P. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know about you, but I write that in my scripts even if I don't need it, just to make sure. But I mean, you can turn it off if you need to. But so overall, the PR introduced a lot of great changes like that, and I think we've all been waiting for file system operations.
Yeah, there's actually a follow-up discussion that we had in the office a couple of days ago, whether files and passes, whether this should be kind of almost like a primitive in the system. I mean, whether there should be kind of a type. When I write a directory, a path type, which is kind of in JavaScript, you want to do a relative path, you use the _ dir name, for example. So that just works with Windows out of the box, right? Yeah, we're hoping, right? Yeah,
it does. Not only does it work with Windows, another opinionated aspect of this, which it's kind of scary. It's a scary thought, but maybe we'll see how it pans out. But by default, all the returned paths from all the FS operations will change all path delimiters to forward slashes, to the POSIX-like slash.
To the correct slashes.
So it's really because even though I don't
the normalized one.
They're normalized. I mean, to be clear, it does not turn Windows paths into POSIX paths. That's not actually like a possible thing to do generically, but it makes them look like it. And for relative paths, it's good enough, because relative paths, the only difference in Windows is the slash, and the allowed characters. I mean, there's some messy bits there, but like on a day-to-day basis.
And the case sensitivity in some operating systems.
Listen, it's not perfect.
No, it's
but the main thing that comes out of this, I think, especially if you work in the CDK a lot and you work in a mixed platform environment, if you work in this type, like, I want my outputs to be deterministic as much as possible. I don't care what platform I'm running on. I want if I call a function with a path, like to join a path or something, I want the path I get back out, if it's relative, to be the same on both platforms. There's really, like, functionally, there's no reason it shouldn't be. So I'm really interested in this approach. If it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out. But like, I'm really glad we're trying this, because I don't think anyone does this. I don't think any file system library does this, and I feel like they should. I feel like it's kind of cool.
Let's see when does it blow up?
I mean, because in theory, there's different things that are allowed in paths and Windows and Linux, and it's there's probably one of these articles of like what developers don't know, or like misconceptions about paths. I'm
like
sure there's one of those. And
yeah, exactly.
Like the time zones one.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll get bitten here, but I'm really happy that like Jade started with this approach, and so it was a really good idea that they did that.
Yeah, and
thanks again, James.
The work was impressive, I have to say. Like from first time contributors, it's the quality was very high, and I was very impressed by the work, and it was really fun to review.
Yep. Okay, on that, and related to that, actually, next one is a change from Lance, who this is not his first contribution. I believe it's his second. His first one was like a documentation or test change, I believe, but now his second one was probably the most like advanced change from a contributor ever, probably, because he dived right into the compiler internals and fixed a pretty major issue with how the compiler is working after like doing like a full visit of it. And I remember seeing he even like did like a documented read through of the compiler source and type checking source, and I was like, wow, that's great. that's not an expected thing for one of your first contributions to a project, I think. So we're really, really excited to see it. But anyway, the change was that variadic, when you called the function that had variadic arguments, it just didn't really type check it.
More stuff
pretty-
for a strongly typed language.
It was I think and it wasn't really noticed because one, I mean, it was introduced recently, so you know, it didn't get heavy use, and also it worked in the happy path because you like generally you don't try to make the compiler fail, so most people were giving it types that should work, and then they seemed to work, and everything was fine. But yeah, it turns out it was not always. I think there were some cases where it would, but let's just say generally it wasn't really type checking arguments you passed. So like for the example. This add dependency, I believe, takes iConstruct or iDependable, I believe is the interface it takes. And it was just kind of just taking whatever you wanted.
So it compiled.
Yeah, so this would compile. I mean, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
It would break during the presynth or whatever, but it was, it should have been a compiler error, and it wasn't. And now it is, thanks to Lance for coming in and fixing that and improving diagnostics around this. Not just the variadics, but like arity, meaning like number of arguments and optional arguments and struct expansion. Like he kind of went through and vetted all those the errors and diagnostics there and made them all work a lot better. So that was really, really great PR.
Awesome.
I don't have a lot to say about it other than that was really cool, really nice.
Nice, very nice.
And I will move to
the next one.
To March year's change to add cloud.domain, which is this was in conversation for a long time because there did seem to be a hole in between, like, you know, cloud.api and cloud.website, and it's like, okay, well, you know, these things, like, there's something missing. Like, generally speaking, you deploy a lot of these to a domain, but like, where does the abstraction fit, you know, in between all these things? And I think Marsha did like an RFC process and went through it and like trying to figure out the design, and now it's here. I mean, I haven't used it, so I can't speak to you know, its usefulness, but I can understand, like, yeah, I'm hosting my website on a domain, and I want to manage that through my infrastructure, but also like, and I probably should have mentioned this on the slide, if I'm deploying it to AWS, I'm probably going to already have a domain that I want to use with my thing, but I still want to represent it in my infrastructure. I don't want it to just be like a secret thing. So it's represented here, but I believe when you compile or that you actually provide command line arguments to push in. I really should have put it here because I can't remember off the top of my head, but like you can give the ARN for the probably the certificate or the hosted zone ID, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Could you speak to that a lot? I actually can't remember it now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact names, but basically, you like, it's the first time we're introducing a resource that's in a sense a reference to a resource, right? Like, it's not really creating the resource when you're compiling your Wing program. The Terraform file, if you're compiling it to AWS, it won't include an actual Route 53 domain, but hosted zone and whatever. But it has this we're introducing this concept, and we're calling it values right now, kind of like homage to Helm, but maybe we'll call it options -o or -v. Currently it's -v -values, and it's basically either through a command line or through a YAML file that basically sets some parameters, and the domain resource requests these values. So basically, when you compile your program to AWS, it'll error and say you need to supply this information in order for me to be able to actually produce the AWS representation. And so that's an example of where you're actually you're connecting to an external here. That's in, yeah.
So as kind of Matthew shows in the PR, that basically when you compile it to TF AWS, the compiler basically tells you that you're missing the IAM certificates in the hosted zone. And then you pass them through the values file. Yeah.
And you can see that it accepts the resource path. So if you have multiple domains, and you can basically say, that root/default/my domain, your domain, their domain, whatever, right? Like you can actually specify. And I'm using this in the containers. I'll show you later, but I'm also using the same mechanism in the containers libraries.
Yep. Awesome.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Marcio. Another great contribution to Marcio. That's awesome.
Yep. Thank you so much for that. Another big piece of the cloud puzzle, cloud abstractions puzzle. So next up is as I mentioned, I didn't include Go declaration here, but Lado will show it off. The main thing I wanted to mention about some recent changes to the language server, aka the IDE experience improvements, is kind of an experiment. I'm right now, the language server will give you a lot of information in a lot more cases. Like hovering over a class will actually show you the constructor and what arguments it takes. That's something that always bugs me about some other, like I'm about to call new class, and I don't know, like, okay, sometimes it'll show the signature completion if I type the parentheses, and this is, but if I'm not doing that, then I can't see it. Always bugged me about a lot of other language servers. So I'm trying out this. It gets a lot. Like sometimes it's a lot of information, but I guess, would you rather have too little or too much? I guess I'd rather have too much, even if it's a little uglier. So I'd love to hear feedback about it, though. Please send messages to Eyal about feedback on this, or me if you want. It's fine either way. But I'm hoping that it can really, help you not have to go reference docs or have to remember stuff and do less trial by error to figure out, like, okay, what do I actually need to do here? You have more information at your disposal.
Yeah, I've already really enjoyed it. Thanks. It's really useful. I think the optional values, the sorting, like the documentation, all that stuff is super useful.
So just to make sure I understand correctly, and I'm looking at this right now at the playground. This is basically when I create a new bucket, I can actually look at the bucket and I see all the fields of the bucket class. Is that what you're basically referring to, Mark?
Yeah, because I think before, and I've noticed that most, okay, I say most. I last referenced like TypeScript, for instance. When you hover over a class in TypeScript, it just kind of just tells you that it's a class. It's like, all right, it's cool. It's cool. It's good information. It doesn't tell you anything else about it, unless it has doc strings on the class itself. It doesn't tell you anything about the class. I'm like, okay, well, but you know about it. Why don't you tell me something about it? And so I always thought that was strange. So now here, if you hover over a class, it'll tell you about all the public, specifically public fields and fields or properties, members. That's the word I'm looking for. All the public members of the class, and it'll tell you about the initializer and the in-flight initializer, the arguments that it takes. I specifically mention that because I feel like that's usually what I actually care about when I'm looking at the class. Is how do I make one?
Yep. No, it's great. So. It's great. I'm looking at domain right now. I see domain name, then I see all the fields. Interesting.
And all this includes like the usual. So struct expansion is as important as usual. So it always tries to expand the struct and show the fields sorted by required first. Yeah, I'm hoping this will help a lot.
Great.
Yeah, I can't wait for renames. That's my next
refactor rename. Refactor rename.
Renames.
It's probably also super easy. I don't know. It's a lot of these are like there's just 1,000 things to do.
Yeah,
they're not each individually too bad.
Yeah, no, and I think like in certain cases, not in every case. I think in some cases it's actually the opposite, but in certain cases it's pretty amazing how easy they are to implement. I think the Go to declaration was beautiful, right? And I think it's because we have this data structure in the compiler and everything is references and symbols, and we have span information about where everything is. So I like it. I really like it when these designs fall into place and then these things become easy. Renames would be really, really powerful and really useful. Definitely on my wish list.
Is there actually an issue for that? I feel like there should be an issue.
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think that there is one.
Because we're all just assuming it's going to happen.
Right. Because
I think it's like, oh, we'll get to it.
On me, I'll open the issue.
I would
Yeah,
say
anything-
maybe it's a good first issue, Mark. I mean, it feels like you're doing most of the stuff here. I'm wondering whether
Maybe
Is it
now,
okay?
so anything to do with symbols is usually easier. Symbols are
Awesome.
usually the easy because like we know all the symbols are, so it's easy to like say to even in all the files that are referenced, it's easy to find symbols. So that's
Got it.
why GoTo declaration and hover both operate on symbols in
Right.
basically the same way. Like look at a symbol and tell me things about it.
Right.
So it's not always easy, a good first issue, but this one might be. Rename actually might be a good candidate for that. So, yeah,
Probably with a bunch of pointers.
yeah. It's because I think the main difficulty is that you're adding a new method. Like it's not you're adding a new, which means you have to deal with the Rust interop with whatever. But it's you should be able to look at how they're added and be like, okay, I can just copy paste. How do we do
Yeah.
that?
And Chris is adding another ticket to his wish list. Go to definition.
And go type definition of balls. Yeah, that's true.
Yep. Cool.
So cool. We
Let's
That's-
move to the
that's
next
that.
one.
I think
Is
that's
that the
why
last one?
that's why Mark is not talking about the stuff that he owns, because every time he talks about it, there's like a flurry of requests coming in from everybody.
it does feel like that sometimes. You're glad. Good thing I don't talk about like GitHub workflow stuff here.
Oh,
I get buried.
wow. You would be buried. That's correct.
Yeah. So next one up, which I hope is something, because my screen's turning black there. Okay, yeah. So the ex.react app. I was trying to remember the actual resource name. So React app. This is kind of, and I think Suf mentioned this last time that she was when she was on the show, that this was coming up, and here it is. It's effectively supercharged website resource. So cloud.website exists, but it's pretty simply like, hey, take the static resource, and I say simply, I'm giving more credit than that, but it takes some static assets and put it somewhere. Now it's accessible. Cool. The React app though now adds a couple extra functionalities that I think most people are looking for when they're creating actual, like, real applications that are websites. Notably, it controls actually the build workflow of how the React app becomes static assets, because realistically you're writing it not, you're writing your app, even if you're writing it in JavaScript, you still want it to go through a bundle step or some minifying or whatever. It's going to go through a process of being built. You don't want to have to build it and point your wing thing to the assets. I want this to be like a holistic process. So the React app resource actually points to your source. And it knows about how that source becomes the dists, the distributable, and it can be a part of that process. And this includes injecting values from Preflight into the React app, which is huge. That's how you get in the example here, like an API URL. So you can build your cloud, and you can access it in a way that makes sense from your React app, a way that you're probably very used to. You have a URL, you're just going to talk to it through your client. And it also, I didn't actually try this. I'm curious how this works. It also works with hot reload. So like, I guess you can run if you wing it, you can actually have like a dev server running for your local site. And so if you change your React app, it'll actually publish to your simulated website as well. I'm assuming that's how it works, which if so, it's really cool.
Awesome.
We need to bring Suf here to demo this.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty amazing, and the environment stuff is also really interesting. I don't know if you.
Yeah, he mentioned.
I touched on it.
Yeah,
but it's definitely there's a lot to think about there, because it's kind of like I know we talked about this through a couple times about the design of like, what does it mean for this interfacing to happen? Right. It's almost, it's kind of like binding. It's kind of like that, but there's a lot more mess and difficulty around it that would be really great to solve. And I think this is one big step in that direction. I think we have more ideas on it, but this at least gets you in the door for sure.
Awesome. Thanks too for this. I haven't used this yet. It's hard enough for me to start a React app. And to figure this out. But I think I will. I think it's interesting to see the Wingit experience is super interesting for me. So I think I've seen the video, but I would love to see it in action.
Yeah, definitely everyone should give it a try. It's very cool. And with that, I'm actually done.
So
as surprising as it is.
Show us again, Mark. Show us again all the slides. I wanna talk about. We haven't talked about this. Time to use Wing. That's nice. Master of your domain. Master of my domain. That's nice. Can you show us the slides again for a second?
I can.
You have the little joke in every one of the
oh yeah,
each one of the slides.
Yeah, I'm sharing it again if you want to look.
Yep. So we have time to use Wing, which is basically kind of the hooks, right? This is
so
what? Yeah.
So they're supposed. Okay, for the record, they're supposed to be jokes that are just kind of like there, like subtle.
Yeah.
And now you're
I feel like if we go over each one specifically, because they're not supposed to be that funny. So if you go over them really like with a really strong eye, you're like, okay, haha. You know?
Yeah, that's exactly the kind
cool.
of humor I like.
All right, let's go. Let's go.
We got information. Have you noticed this? You want information? We got more information for you.
You're killing me now.
No, I actually the master of your domain. That's the thing that kind of caught my attention. That's I don't know why. It's probably.
Technically, I'm meaning it. What were you gonna say?
Is it a Seinfeld reference or is it?
I mean, I was thinking about it like that. It is.
Okay.
But
awesome.
I mean, it's also just a phrase you say. I mean,
yeah,
you can also say that. But I meant it as a Seinfeld reference.
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. King of the castle, master of your domain.
Awesome.
That's what I've noticed. Yeah. Awesome. Habit path testing.
Habit path testing. Classic hits like read file and write file. I'm just gonna turn the screen off. I'm gonna.
Yeah. Okay.
It feels so weird to go over.
Okay. Okay. We can do it. We can do that. I just want to highlight it.
Oh no! You know what? I'll talk about this one. Wing left pad. First person that makes Wing left pad a published package.
Nice.
So this one this was intentional. I want someone to make this, and then we can report them to NPM.
Awesome. Great.
I love it.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for this very informative and fun, and thanks for all the contribution. That's great work, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on again.
Thanks, man.
Am I going? Mark. Okay, bye.
You're going.
You're welcome to stay if you want.
You're welcome to stay. Yeah, sure. We have the next thing on our show. We have, let me jump in the banner for a second. Okay, the branding, sorry. We have the container support. Have you seen it, Mark?
I've seen the repo. I haven't tried it. I only use it to test to make sure my changes worked for the language server. That's what I was doing. Here, I won't stay on the screen to busy things up, but I'll stay on the thing if you guys want to call me back.
Yeah, you can.
Awesome.
Let us know what you think.
Thanks, you man. Okay. See you. Bye. And also, thanks for Sam for this warm thoughts. Our families are okay, and all the families of the core Wing team are okay. It's kind of as I mentioned. We all know a person who knows a person. That's the way it goes in Israel. Thank you, Sam. So container support, Elad.
Yes. I mean, I'm going to show you a work in progress. Okay, it's important to put a big disclaimer here. I think one of the cool things was that I was able to actually start working on this as Chris was finishing his work on libraries, which again, I haven't published it as a library yet, but I think there's something really amazing in terms of our ability to innovate and experiment generally around Wing once we have this ability of publishing libraries, because the foundation is becoming more stable, and as it becomes more stable, it's harder to change, and it's more bureaucratic. You need to get someone to review your pull requests. We want to make sure that there's documentation for everything, right? Like the bar is getting higher and higher to change stuff at the foundational level. But then if I want to just experiment with something like containers, or experiment with something like websites, or experiment with whatever, AI agents library, now very soon is going to be super easy. But now I can actually just publish these libraries and people can start using them. And so that's been a really cool opportunity. We do want to include containers in the foundational library, right? Like we believe containers need to be first class building block of the Wing Cloud Library, and long running services are. We actually have cloud.service already, but we don't have implementation for cloud.service on AWS and GCP and Azure. And the plan is to basically use the container API in order to implement these this high-level long-running service API. So that's going to be super interesting to see how that plays out. So let me show you what I have. I'm going to start with the API and the experience, the user experience, and if we have some time, then I'm happy to dive a little deeper into the implementation and the pain, all the pain. So let me make sure that I have everything ready here. I was trying to make some tests before sorry. Give me a second. Let's see.
We're all waiting. No pressure, man.
Present my screen. And I have my entire screen. Okay. So let's see. So currently, just to make sure, this is available under Wing Containers. I can't say it's available yet, right? Because it's not really ready for consumption, but it's slowly being developed under this repository under my account, and so. And I'm slowly gathering the roadmap, and you can see little checkboxes slowly filling in on all the holes, and it's already doing quite a lot of things. Let me show you the basic experience. So let's bring this library over. So currently I'm just bringing it as a module, as a local module, and the main API here is workload. And you can see Mark's new documentation stuff over here.
Elad, do you mind zooming in a little bit? Kind of enlarging your font?
Yeah, sure. Is it better?
Yeah, I think it's. I don't know. Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you see that basically workload has two required keyword attributes: name and image. Everything else is optional. And so the easiest thing to do is to basically start with something like that. Let's see. Let's start by just deploying a container from Docker Hub. Kind of like a simple HTTP echo container. We'll call it HTTP echo. And the image is, I think I remember. I have it somewhere in my tests. Let's see. Simple. So yeah, HashiCorp has one.
Okay.
And now HTTP echo exposes a port, and so in order to be able to actually connect to the container, if I just deploy this, I'm going to have a container deployed, but I don't really have any ability to interact with that container. Right. And so the port that it exposes is 5678. So basically, I'm going to do port 5678, and that's it. So basically, deploy this container called HTTP echo with 56678. This is very, very straightforward. I'm going to wing it.
Wait, I need to understand this a little bit. The container itself uses the 5678, and you're just exporting it. Is that what's happening?
Basically, I'm not. The current API doesn't have any explicit way to say which external port it exposes.
Okay.
Basically, the internal port is 5678, and that's it. I want to be able to access this container.
Okay.
And so you see I have a Wing console started here.
Right.
And you see that it pulled the image and it started it and it executed it with, with these parameters.
Awesome.
And now I actually want to interact with it, but I don't really know. I don't really know how, right? Because I need the URL of this container. And
Right.
so let's do this and create a cloud function.
Okay.
Call it get URL and put this here. I'm going to call it echo. And here I have an API that says URL.
Nice.
It actually also have an API called internal URL. And that's an interesting distinction between the public URL of the container and an internal URL. Because in many containerized, container orchestration systems, you have this ability to actually interact between microservices that are running within the same cluster, but they don't necessarily have to have an external public, load balancer exposed to the internet. And so we also have this ability to specify whether it's a public workload or not. And as long as
what would be the result if I try to access the external URL when it's not public?
there's no external URL, so there's going to be null.
Okay,
Just-
awesome.
So, but I think that I'm not sure that this internal thing is actually working. So the internal thing in the simulator is basically going to allow Docker to Docker communication. So if I have multiple workloads running on my machine, then there's a way for multiple Docker containers to interact with each other. Like this special host.
Not Cloud Function to be able to interact with it, but Docker to Docker. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. If I want to interact with it from a Cloud Function,
Got it.
I need to make it public.
Got
And
it.
so now I have the URL here, and so I do this and then log URL. And then I'm going to save this, and you see that as soon as I saved it, it stopped the container and it started it again. And now if I call this thing here, I get a URL, and I can see the URL.
Nice.
And we get a really nice experience, right? Like I think like this guy has like the ability to specify. Again, I don't remember the API exactly. Let me see my test. Yeah, you can actually specify like an argument that says what's the output. So let's just do something like this. AL. And this is restarting.
It will have a new public URL, right?
It'll have a new public URL.
Which is annoying. We all know.
Which is annoying. We all know.
Yeah.
But now we actually have a YAL.
Now we actually have a YAL.
And so we get this like nice developer experience. The plan is to actually add some more hot reloading capabilities for the local experience. Because you saw that it actually took some time for the container to be stopped and started. And I do have some optimizations already around changes. And so if for example, if you have your local image and you haven't changed it, it won't rebuild the image, right? So it does have some initial optimizations there, but I think like we definitely need some more, right? Like I feel like that's definitely it's working, but it's not as fast as I want it to be in a sense. Okay,
and we got a short kind of explanation on the bridge networking model in Docker that they're running on local source and post, and the combo gives you a service name to the outside world. Awesome.
Okay, so now let's deploy this to AWS, and I'm going to do wing compile -t tf AWS, and now let me talk about how containers are implemented on AWS. And so our default implementation is using an EKS cluster. We kind of made a decision to start with Kubernetes as a container orchestration system because it's, we see it a lot in the industry, and it's also some commonalities across cloud providers, and that means that, being able to deploy on EKS has some similarities to being able to deploy on, GKE or other Kubernetes systems.
Right.
And the way we do it is we basically generate a Helm chart for your application. Now, if you're just running wing compile -ttf AWS, and let me do that for a second.
Okay.
And I'm going to look at the target here. What you'll see is basically an entire EKS cluster,
Right.
which is a very messy, very messy deployment, right? Like it actually, like doing, I actually wrote the original version of the EKS CDK construct. And I spent about 3 months doing that, kind of like learning exactly all the degrees of freedom of EKS and exactly how it's deployed. And I remember having this feeling is like, oh, thank God that's the last time I have to do this. because I said, we're building the EKS module for EKS CDK construct. And now I had to do this again. And I've actually done this with the EKS module for Terraform. And I'm going to show you the code a little bit later, but it is still extremely hairy, right? Like this whole thing. But the default implementation is basically that it creates a cluster for your application, which is not a very common
Yeah,
path,
right. Usually you don't want to, other people will create the cluster for you, right? I mean, you have an existing cluster.
Yeah, usually there's a cluster is usually a shared resource in many teams, very much like a VPC, right? Like a VPC is also usually a shared resource. And so what I've been experimenting here, and that's something that we want to support more deeply, I guess, in the framework, but I've been experimenting with this idea of being able to actually provide either, so the default implementation is batteries included, right? Like it's like this is just going to work. But you can actually also specify a values file. And the values file is basically your way to connect to the EKS cluster. And I guess I shouldn't be showing
and now you're sharing. Okay, so let's that's an L, S, and a 0.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm recycling these clusters every time. Okay. Now, the reason I needed this, this is something that I plan to do from the get-go, but the reason I needed this was because I really, like, creating an EKS cluster takes about 20 minutes. Okay. And so I couldn't really iterate, right? Like, there's no way for me to iterate. So now what we're going to do, let me delete the target, and I'm going to compile. We're not going to wait 20 minutes to create an EKS cluster. So now I'm just going to pass the values file and provide my application. And now it's basically compiling to connect to the existing cluster. And so if you see the Terraform here, you'll basically only see there's some stuff that's related to the function, actually. There's a function here that I created. So those are not really related.
Right.
We can even remove it maybe for now. Let me do that. Not to confuse
our viewers.
Our viewers, yeah, exactly. And so here you can see the basically Helm release. So that's basically a Helm resource. And
interesting.
You see that there's basically a Helm chart created for this application based on the workload definition. And there's a bunch of information here.
Wait, where do I see, before you show us the Helm release, can you go back to where is the reference to the existing
to the Helm chart?
To the existing EKS.
Okay, the reference happens here. Basically, when you're defining the Helm provider in Terraform,
interesting.
You're specifying the Kubernetes connection information.
Awesome.
And then that's basically it, right? Like the Helm release. So I can actually provide any Kubernetes, right? Like there's no constraint in terms of like which Kubernetes cluster. And then
it uses the same mechanism, the resource mechanism that Terraform has to upload the files, and then.
Yeah, and you see, this is basically just one resource. This entire application is just one resource.
Interesting.
Which is pretty cool. I think like it's a pretty nice.
The file itself can be a bunch of resources, right? I mean, Kubernetes resources.
Yeah, exactly. The Helm chart may include multiple resources, and that's what I showed you earlier. So it basically has like.
So what do we have here?
A deployment, right?
Right.
And it has a service,
Right.
and it has an ingress because we requested that the service is public. So if I actually remove the public from here,
So we're not going to have the ingress at all.
we're not going to have the ingress, right?
It changes the file name, right? That's why.
Yeah, I changed the file name, so I think it's
Right.
supposed to be here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this just includes the service and the deployment.
Yeah, it didn't delete the old file.
It doesn't delete the old files.
Right.
Okay.
Interesting.
Shall we try to deploy this? Of
First of all,
course.
this is awesome, man. This is the first time I'm seeing it, so it's crazy. It's awesome. It's the first time we're seeing basically a Helm chart as part of our deployment. That's a first, right? It's the first time I'm seeing connecting into an existing resource. It's something that we've talked about a lot. And let's see. So what will deploy do? What does Terraform deploy? What does Terraform apply actually does in this case? So
It basically does Helm release.
it does Helm. Yeah, it does that.
Helm deploy, Helm
Apply.
release, Helm install, I think.
Helm something.
Helm install. Yeah.
We have a question. What's the? When you spin up the Kubernetes cluster, it kicks out the kube config. File for you to connect. Nice. It doesn't. I'm pretty sure it doesn't, right? When you spin up a Kubernetes cluster, it kicks out a kube config file for you to connect. Do you create?
Yeah. So basically, in AWS, when you have EKS, there's a way. Yeah. There's a command called update kubectfig.
Got it.
You can basically do this, and you specify the name of the cluster.
Awesome.
So in my case, the name is you can find it here in the values file, right?
In the secret file. Yeah.
Wing EKS in this case. Okay, so this was deployed, and now let's check our Kubernetes, and so you see that now I have my service and my deployment and my replica set, and
where did you state the replica? I mean, why do we have two replicas?
Deployment is that's the default replicas, and I can actually specify it here. So I can
change it.
10.
Okay. Okay.
And
compile.
Let's compile.
No, the Terraform plan will not be helpful here, right? Because it doesn't look inside the Helm chart. It just shows you that the Helm chart is different.
It's going to show that the Helm chart has changed. You see?
Yeah, makes sense.
Kubectl. So yeah, we saw the pods, we saw the service, and we can also see the ingress. And you see this is basically a load balancer, an ALB.
Yep.
And so if I access it, it actually takes some time for it to load, but it's.
What do you mean load? For the latency or
the ALB to actually
to be connected?
Health check the instance and onboard a new instance. So
do you have health checks? Can you configure? Can I configure health check? Can I say
there's currently only support for readiness.
Readiness.
But I'm gonna also include health checks.
Readiness is basically just to make sure that this is on, right? I mean, you can do
initialize, yeah, like that. All the dependencies basically are ready for you.
And what's the API for the readiness? What does it accept?
Basically a URL.
A URL?
A ready or something like that, or ping.
And it needs to return a 200 or something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Wow.
The other thing that's actually working, which is
did the 10 replicas work? Because I'm not sure. I think you're trying to.
I'm not trying to hide it. Let's see.
Oh, it just finished. Okay, it worked, man. Wow. This is awesome, man.
This is using Fargate. This is using Fargate as a default, which means that I can basically request any number of until I reach my soft limits. But it'll basically allocate hardware as required, or like compute resources as needed. But the EKS configuration, the EKS actually have like an EKS. Let me show you.
yeah, a lot. I'm thinking about this. You're using the kind of a public Docker image in this example. Can I use
Yeah.
some? Does it have an ECR behind the scenes? Can I use my
So
own image?
let me show you. Let me show. I wanted to show
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say I have this front end Docker file.
Okay.
Right.
Nice.
And it's basically a stupid node program that shows this hello wingnut stuff and opens a port on 3000. Okay, super simple.
Yep. Yep.
So let's create a new container. New container workload and call it front-end. And image is going to be, so now instead of specifying a Docker hub image, I'm specifying ./frontend, which tells the workload class that this image is a local image.
Okay.
And the port is 3000. And I guess that's it, right? Like it doesn't need anything additional. I probably want to do it public as well.
Right. Right.
And let's do this for now and put FE here.
Okay. So we're running this locally.
And so now we just saved it, and you see that it's basically failing on something. What does it say?
Docker run detached.
I'm able to start container process. Oh, I think I haven't changed it to an executable.
What needs to be an executable?
The index file, because the Docker file says that the entry point is this. And so it doesn't go through node, right? Like, so basically the index file, see, has like a
Okay. I see.
here.
Yeah.
It's already reloading.
That's nice. What happened behind the scenes? Does it build? I mean, does it build?
It builds the image.
Builds the image. And you're not doing any performance optimization right now, right? It's not. It's actually building the entire image every time.
It builds. Yeah, it builds the entire. I mean, it uses Docker. Let me restart that. I think that's it, right. So
Yeah, wing it.
I need to re-wing it. Wing it. Decided to run on dark mode now. Still not working. Why not? Executable now. Let's see. We really need to get these logs up here.
The pre-flight logs.
Yeah. Unable to start. Yeah, it sounds like it's the same problem.
Unable to start container app index permission denied unknown. Does it? It's /app because it does. Okay.
What am I doing wrong? Let me see.
Where is the /app? Where is the /app?
It just adds it to the container.
Okay. It adds, and
if I go to, let's see. I can just Docker build, run.
So there's a question that Chris is setting up, is asking, does the simulator use Minikube or something like that?
No, it's basically just running Docker locally.
So there's a decision here that you're not abstracting Kubernetes, you're abstracting an orchestration, a kind of a Docker Docker orchestration, where basically Kubernetes is an implementation of that. And in the simulator, you're just running Docker.
Exactly.
So you won't have replicas probably on the local host. You haven't implemented the replicas.
Correct. Let's give it another run.
Was the Docker compile running? Was it able to run?
Yeah, it seems like it's running, and I don't know why it's. Let me try. I don't know if that's the reason, but I'm gonna try and do this anyway.
Okay. What happens if you do Docker PS right now? What's running on your machine right now? The HTTP
WordPress.
echo.
I'm actually using Orb Stack, which is pretty neat.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Can you show us the permission of the index.js file? ls.
mm, no, sorry.
Well, this is exactly why we have you behind the scenes. You're trying to figure out what's wrong here.
Entry point. Up index permission denied. It's weird because it's definitely did work. But you know how demos are.
Yep.
Let me see. Oh, I'm gonna take one of the tests that I have here.
Okay. Same.
This looks like the same, right?
You change the exposed.
Yeah, this is
code.
1000, and this is just a little
What's
bit
the permission on this file? Can you show us the output of ls?
Yeah.
And your file? Sure.
Looks the same, right?
Yeah.
And the weird thing is that when I built it locally, when I build it manually, it actually works. So it sounds like it might be something in the way the build command that might have changed. Okay. Weird. Maybe the name of the file was wrong. I don't know. Whatever.
Who knows?
Okay, now it's running, and I'm gonna get the URL.
So now we've built this thing locally. I mean, and it's still running, and
the port is a different port. Give me a second.
Yeah, it was 4,000. Now it's exactly. So now you've built this locally. The previous example, you basically fetched the Docker image,
Right.
and now you're building this locally and running this locally, and the result 12. What's in the code over there?
Result 12.
Okay, nice.
And now if I do wing compile, right?
Right.
Let's keep this guy.
Okay.
And Terraform apply.
Are we going to see any change? We're not going to see any change, right? The Helm chart is basically the same, right? But
no. So first of all, it's another Helm chart. And second of all, you'll notice that I also.
What do you mean another? What do you mean another Helm chart? Another Helm file?
I have another container, basically another workload.
Is it another Helm file? Oh.
Yeah, it'll be another Helm file.
Two. I'm not sure I understand. Are there two Helm files right now, or just a single Helm file?
There's going to be two, one for each container, right? One for the front end.
Yeah.
One for each workload, right? One for
that's an implementation detail. That's not.
That's an implementation detail, definitely.
Yeah.
But it's usually the way you do it, right? Like it's basically a Helm file per application or per workload, right?
Yeah. So what you're saying, you usually use the deployment, the service, and the ingress on the same. It makes sense to put them in the same file.
They're kind of. That's how I think a lot of.
And I think it makes sense also from a diff perspective, from an applied perspective. What has changed? This hasn't changed, and this has changed.
Exactly. So now I have this Helm release of front end, but I also have a new ECR repository.
So it figured out that this is not something that we're building because of the / that you had. That's something locally, and then automatically it added an ECR,
with lifecycle policy and whatever.
I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
Lifecycle policy means that it's basically cleaning up unused and tagged
Okay.
images.
And
And it shows. Oh, and there's also like this thing called null resource, which is basically how you can build and push a Docker image from within your Terraform file. So if I'm going to press yes here, what it'll do, it'll create the ECR repository, and it'll fail.
Of course.
And why would it fail?
Because of that null resource that you just mentioned. No, that's
no,
get
I know.
login password. It's an authentication problem.
No, it's this.
Oh, interesting.
This is the whole path thing. Remember we just
Yeah.
talked about it. That's the reason
Yeah.
one of the reasons we need it.
Yeah.
Because the ability to actually identify the relative path to a source file
Yep.
is not
Different.
trivial, right?
Yeah.
You can't do it without additional information.
Because now it's
You can see that it's built the image and it's pushing it to the repository. And so that's what the null resource is doing. And once this whole thing is pushed, we should see the Helm chart starting to get created. And you see this thing is starting to pop up. And we'll see
here.
it getting pulled in a second. Da, 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 da. It takes some time. Fargate takes some time to schedule compute capacity.
Because it doesn't work with an existing node and just add a pod.
Yeah, so you see now it basically took 41 seconds to basically allocate a machine, and then the container started. So if the EKS cluster would have like capacity, they manage node groups, then it would take very quickly. It would take like 5 seconds to get started, which I think we can there's actually support for that, but I chose to use Fargate too.
Yeah.
And so now if you look at this, basically our little front end here, the ingress will probably take a little bit to stabilize, as I said, but there's also an ingress. We can try and access it. There we go. There's
Nice,
ingress.
man. Wow, this is interesting. This is impressive.
And I'm not going to show you because we don't have time, but there's actually cross-service communication working also. So I'll just show you how it looks. So here's the microservice example. So let's say we have this producer resource workload, which is not public. See, there's no public here, and there's a consumer resource, consumer workload. The consumer takes an environment variable with the producer's URL.
Can you show how you're using it? In the code?
And inside it basically says, okay, producer URL, and then I'm just doing HTTP GET, right? Over here.
And that's supposed to work for both internal and...
That works both I think for internal, I can show you. I can probably show this to you, both for internal and non-internal. Let's see. Wing it test microservice. Closing this guy, and this guy, and this guy, and this guy. There we go. And so this guy is basically sending a request to the consumer, right?
Right.
And the producer result contains the
Nice.
So basically, this is the result that comes. It basically changed the output.
Interesting.
And if I want to be very bold, I can.
By the way, does Wing Test also works with the value file?
No, because wing test is, I mean, currently no. Oh, you know what? Maybe it does. Maybe
It should,
does.
right? I mean, I
Like
want
the
to know if I like
TF-AWS,
it.
yeah, the TF-AWS version.
Yep. I think you're trying to show us that it's going to work, right? That's what you're showing
Yeah,
us the decentralized works.
maybe until while this is working, I can just give you a quick tour of like the code.
Okay.
So basically, this is the simulator version workload.
You have to,
Implement. Look at
there was a
this.
reason there was a reason we asked you to enlarge the font.
Sorry. So see this? Blink.
Yep.
I'm showing you go to definition.
Yep.
So basically, the API is iWorkload, and it has start and stop is actually something that we probably won't include. But there's a URL in the internal URL thing, and this is the container options, what we've seen earlier. And then this is basically implemented using a cloud.service. So there's basically a cloud.service underneath, which is this local service. I'm not going to go into every detail here, but basically what we're doing when it started is basically if it's a local path, then it's doing Docker build. Otherwise, it's pulling, running, starting the containers, retrieving the external ports, everything, right? So that's the local.
So going back to the question Chris has asked before, the local implementation of this basically just runs Docker.
Exactly, just runs Docker, orchestrates it through Docker.
Yeah.
And the AWS implementation is a bit more involved, obviously. But if we look at it from the workload perspective, it's actually pretty cool. Like you can see that it's doing cluster get or create. So it basically goes to the EKS cluster class, and it says get or create cluster, and it receives an iCluster. So if you go to get or create, then you'll see that iCluster is basically some interface that implements cluster attributes, which is basically these three.
Yep. So it's
basically a reference.
Yeah, it's a reference to an existing cluster or to the one that we just created, right?
Exactly. And there's also
it's a read-only reference, right?
It's also a singleton at the app level. So if I have multiple workloads and I'm not referencing an external cluster, it'll only create one, right? Like it won't create an EKS cluster for every workload, right? At least. And so all this goo here, and I think we should definitely do something about it, but all this goo here is how to create, basically the way to create singletons in Wing. So basically, I'm not going to go into that, but that's a mess.
Yeah, it's going over the tree.
And yeah, exactly. And then what you see here is basically the stuff that reads from the EKS from the values. There's a values file. So this is basically the way to read it from the values file.
Oh, so you're actually reading it from the value. The values file. How do you do this? The values file.
Actually, I created like this class that represents the values file. See values.w.
Yeah.
And it basically reads. It has some environment variables. We need to put this needs to be part of the SDK.
This should be part of the mechanism in the SDK. Makes sense.
Exactly. But I was playing around with that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So again, this is public, right? This entire LLB Wing containers, right?
Yeah.
Awesome, man. This was a great demo, Elad. I was skeptical at first because I know.
Okay, now it's not going to work. So let me see.
Let me get it back.
There we go.
Wait, we're not seeing it. We're not seeing it. Okay. Does it work?
Yeah.
Let me show you. Let me remove the banner for a second. Oh, nice, man. Awesome. So what we're seeing right now is the same thing we saw in the Wingit command. We have two containers talking with each other. Then the mechanism is the add environment, or basically the environment that you put. Can you go back to the code for a second? Not go back to myself, seeing myself as inside myself.
Microservice test. Yeah, this guy.
So this thing, the producer URL, the producer.internal URL, This is awesome. So now inside that image, we have the environment, and we can just access, and you're doing a fetch on it over it.
Exactly.
Very simple, and very powerful kind of an ability to kind of combine kind of code written in.
Yeah, it's basically kind of starting to look at the microservice
Right.
support, right, in a sense.
Awesome.
And it's using DNS, and it's so hairy. This whole thing is like, oh my god, I can't believe everybody's doing this. This is, and I'm using EKS, which is a managed Kubernetes solution,
Yep.
and I'm using Terraform modules, which are abstracting a lot of the details of how to define the resources, and still it's like crazy hairy. You look at the code of the EKS.w file, even that code, which is like, again, as I said, using a lot of the Terraform modules and EKS stuff, is not straightforward at all. But yeah, I think like this is exactly why we're here.
Yeah, and another level of abstraction. Basically, we're saying let's talk about workloads, replicas, what we care about.
Yeah,
This was awesome, man. This was really fun, and it worked. And it worked.
Yeah, I mean,
was
I'm
great.
sure there's so many details. I think that it's going to take It's going to take some time for this library to mature and stabilize, and there's definitely.
Do you have a next step for it? Do you have the next stuff? The next thing you want to do with it?
So first of all, the public URL is not supported yet on AWS, so that's something that I need to.
Okay.
Yeah, I have like a whole roadmap here.
Okay.
And I want to get to the point where I can support. I can access a Redis resource.
Okay.
From the container. So
Right.
so ex.redis from within the container.
But you need Redis doesn't give us right now a URL. So how are you going to?
Redis
pass a client?
Redis does give us a URL.
We have a. I don't think we'd have it, do we?
But yeah, it might need to make some changes in Redis. And I think the hardest part is actually not the URL, is the fact that the VPC that I'm currently deploying the cluster into is not the same VPC as the Redis. And so the first thing that I'm going to need to do is basically merge these two VPCs together into a kind of like a system VPC. Because the system VPC is not configured properly for EKS, so we actually need to like create some kind of a default common denominator that will support. And then it's going to be possible to actually connect from the container to Redis.
Right.
It's going to be pretty challenging. I think there's going to be some security groups involved, and every time security groups are involved, I'm like, my brain is exploding to 12 times when I need to understand exactly.
I have a feeling that the person who should be worried is Hassan. I don't know why. That's what I'm feeling.
So yeah, Redis. I think the other thing that I want to get is something like Cloud.Bucket, right? Like be able to actually access Cloud.Bucket. Cloud.Load Balancer. I don't know. That's actually a good question. I'm not sure. Cloud.Load Balancer is a pretty low level abstraction. I mean, there is a load balancer, right? Like there is a load balancer here.
The English is the load balancer in this example, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so currently, when you're basically saying I want this workload to have a public endpoint, it automatically assigns a load balancer for it. Yeah. So it's kind of like FlyIO in a way, right? Like when you're deploying a FlyIO machine, you basically get a public URL for it. So it does have its own ingress mechanism, basically. Oh, you mean like within the workload? It's been something that I was originally thinking maybe we need some support for ingress routes, right, in the workload API. But the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm not certain that it's actually needed, because if you look at other container abstractions like FlyIO, for example, or even things like Render or other types of like container-based paths, high level APIs. In most cases, you basically just get a public DNS name for your container, right? Like you basically deploy a container and you get here's the URL. You can access it to whatever you want, right? Like this idea of like having like a single ingress that has ingress rules that route to different workloads within the same system. I don't know.
I've used this in the past. We had a monolith, and the monolith was given a service in different passes, and then we took different passes and we put them in different workloads. So eventually, you have a single ingress, and kind of like an ALB. You
Right.
Kind of,
yeah. Anyway, we'll experiment with that.
We'll see. Yeah, awesome. This was great, man. This was exciting. It's wow, a lot of work. Great job, man. Yeah. And I think we're 26 minutes out of time, which is
promiscuous mode.
Yeah, which was fun. I kind of enjoyed it. Thank you, Mark. Thanks a lot. Thanks for this hour and a half, and thanks for the viewers. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. And stay safe, everyone.
Stay safe. Bye. See you later.
Bye.